In this video, we're going to talk about the basics of geometry, which are points, lines, and planes. So in geometry, there are three undefined terms, and yes, you've guessed them. They are point, line, and plane. A point is going to have 0 dimension. A point is just a location in space. You cannot measure a location in space. You can say where it is, like a GPS coordinate, but you cannot measure the location in space, okay? It is going to be named with a capital letter, would be called, for example, point A. A line is going to have only one dimension. Essentially, it's just going back and forth, back and forth. You're going to name this with 2 capital letters. So for example, this would be called line AB. And since it's a line, we have to indicate it's a line. So we're going to put a little line symbol on top of it. Now, the other way you could name a line is not just with 2 capital letters, but sometimes you have a little letter here like M, and in this case you would call it line M. Through any 2 points, there's going to be exactly 1 line. Now, a plane is just another word for a flat surface. It's going to have 2 dimensions, and the most famous plane is the coordinate plane. Most of you know that as the XY coordinate plane, and it's called XY because it has 2 dimensions. And later on in your math journeys, you may learn about a 3rd dimension, the Z plane, and that just means a 3D space. We live in a 3D space, but a plane, everything that takes place in geometry takes place on this plane that is 2-dimensional. Now, the only way you can name a plane, or there's 2 ways to name a plane, is with any 3 points, but these 3 points cannot be on the same line. The other way to name a plane, so for example, if this was your classroom and the people in the classroom's names were Abigail, Bob, and Chris, you would say this is a classroom called Abigail, Bob, and Chris. However, if you didn't know any of the people's names, or if there were no people in the classroom, you might just say, oh, this is classroom 100. So the same way that you can name a line with just 1 letter, you could call this, for example, plane N. And plane N just refers to the plane itself, not the points that are contained within the plane. When you have points, they can be collinear, and collinear just means 2 or more points on the same line. Here's what a diagram would look like of this. Along with collinear, we have coplanar, and coplanar just means points that are on the same plane. So here are 3 points that are on the same plane. Remember, W is not a point. W is the name of the plane. You also could name it plane ABC because those points are coplanar. So here's a few examples. Give another name for LN. You could also call this line B, or you could call it LM. Make sure you put the line on top. Give another name for plane Z. You're going to pick any 3 points on this plane that are not in a straight line. So you cannot call it LMN. You could say, for example, it's plane LMP, as long as you pick 3 points not in a straight line. Name 3 points that are collinear. That would be L, M, and N. And 4 points that are coplanar would be L, M, N, and P. Q is not on the plane. Give 2 other names for MQ. So the easiest way to do this is to just reverse the letters because it's a line and call it QM. You also could call it line A. That's this line right here. And the last one says name a point that is not coplanar with points L, N, and P. L, N, and P are all lying on this plane. Point Q is above the plane. So let's talk about some of the other things you're going to see in geometry. The first thing you're going to see is the term line. A line looks like this, and you have to make sure that it has an arrow on both sides. And the important thing is that it's going to go on forever in 2 directions. Okay, so we would call this line AB. The next term is a line segment, and a segment is just a partial part of a line. It looks like this. It has 2 endpoints, and it's this one, and this one is called line segment AB, and you would write that by either saying AB, or you could reverse it and say it's called line BA. And the important thing to remember is that it can be measured. And so everything that we're going to do in geometry is going to pretty much be with line segments because you're going to be able to measure this line segment, and that's going to allow you to create equations. Lastly, the term ray refers to a part of a line that starts at one point and goes on forever. And this is a little bit confusing because the starting point is actually called the end point. So in this picture, the end point is called O, and it goes on forever towards A. The symbol for ray is the arrow pointing to the right, no matter the direction of the actual ray. You cannot switch the letters in this one and call it AO, because that would mean it starts at A and goes forever towards O, and that's not what's going on here. So you cannot call it AO. You have to only call it OA. And the important information to remember about this is that it goes on forever in one direction with infinite measure. So you also cannot truly measure a ray. Now, in terms of rays, you're going to have two different ways that the rays are going to meet or intersect. These are intersecting rays, and this is how we're going to get all of our angles in geometry, which is going to be a lesson for another time. But this would be two intersecting rays. They intersect at point A. And the important information is that they intersect to form an angle. Opposite rays are going to meet like this, and they're going to go in two completely different directions. So for example, C is going east and A is going west. These are opposite rays. They are never going to see each other again. A and C would never see each other. And this makes a straight line. So a few example questions. Give another name for Vx. The easiest way to do that is to just reverse the letters in the segment. Name all rays with endpoint W. Remember, the endpoint is just where the ray starts. So you have Wx, Wy, Wz, Wv, and of course you need that ray symbol on top of all of these letters. Name a pair of opposite rays. There's actually two pairs of opposite rays in this diagram. It only wants one of them though. So I'm going to name Wx, which is going to the right, and Wv, which is going to the left. Give another name for YW. You could just call this WY. And then 5 and 6 are a little tricky. It wants to know, in number 5, are Vx and Xv the same ray? I know there's this overlap of the rays right here. However, they are not going in the same direction. So these are not going to be the same rays. Lastly, it wants to know, are Vx and Wx the same ray? So even though they don't start at the same point, they are going in the same direction. And so this question is yes, they are the same ray. Now that we've learned about points, lines, and planes, we have to discuss if these things ever meet or intersect. So you have three different options here. The first one is when two lines intersect. You have to just think about this like two streets intersecting. They are going to meet at a point. So you would say these two lines meet, for example, at point A. A line in a plane, this is like if you had a Post-it and you put a toothpick through it. They are going to meet exactly where that toothpick goes through the Post-it at a point. And lastly, you have two planes intersecting. These two planes intersecting are going to meet all along this line right here. And so two planes intersect at a line. A few examples if you want to pause the video and try to draw these by yourself. This wants you to draw ray AB and line segment CD intersecting at E. The next one says draw plane M containing linear points X, Y, and Z. So here's plane M containing linear points X, Y, and Z being intersected at Y by line. So I'm going to intersect this plane at Y by line A, B. And lastly, it wants me to draw plane cat intersecting plane dog. So the easiest way to do this is to draw a parallelogram. Find the center of the front and the back of the parallelogram. Go up, over, dashed line, down, come out the bottom, and here is your line where these two planes intersect. We have to remember to call this plane cat, so let's just put CAT, and we can put DOG on this plane down here. That's all for this video. As always, if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit like and subscribe. You can find this resource along with many others on my Teachers Pay Teachers, which is Math with B.